welcome to the new MI6.
I'm your quartermaster.
You must be joking.
Author PPKS 9mm short. It's been coded to your palm print, so only you can fire it. Less of a random killing machine, more of a personal statement.
Q.
007.
I want to meet your employer.
How much do you know about fear?
All there is.
Oh, not like this. Not like him.
Just look at you, chasing spies. England, MI6. She sent you after me knowing you're not ready, knowing you would likely die. Mommy was very bad. The two survivors, this is what she made us.
Everybody needs a hobby.
So what's yours?
Resurrection.
Alright, so that should have been some of the trailer for Skyfall. This is the 23rd entry in the James Bond franchise, celebrating its 50th year. This film stars Daniel Craig as James Bond, and the film opens with him taking he doesn't quite get the job done. So cut a month or so later, and suddenly MI6 is in trouble. James Bond returns and is given his new mission to solve why MI6 and M seem to be in danger. This leads him to discovering a villain played by Javier Bardem who has his own agenda going on, and it forces James Bond to deal with both him and things involving M and his own status as an agent with a license to kill. So, with all that said, I thought that was pretty concise. Scott Mendelson, what did you think of Skyfall?
I liked it a lot. I think it's if I don't think it's the best Bond film ever, that's not really a criticism. It's a very good picture. It's very well acted. It's very well directed. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I kind of hope Roger Deakins finally wins an Oscar for this, because it is easily the best-looking blockbuster of the year, and maybe the best-looking film, period, of the year. I'd argue the only thing cooler than actually shooting on IMAX is making it look like you shot on IMAX without actually doing it. And that's what this film really looks like. You know, I unfortunately, since the studios don't screen in IMAX anymore for press screenings, I saw this in a conventional theater, but there are shots where I'm going, wow, if you had told me this was shot in IMAX, I would believe you. The action scenes are relatively low-key, more or less, but they are engaging and generally creative. My only qualm with the picture, over a few little bits and pieces, my biggest qualm with the picture is a lot of the themes and the subtext feel taken from other James Bond films. Mostly, frankly, 3 of the 4 Pierce Brosnan films that preceded this. You have, James Bond not knowing if he's still relevant from GoldenEye. You have a villain that's tied to MI6 and is basically a former James Bond, like in GoldenEye. You have James Bond sustaining an injury and that affecting his duty, like The World Is Not Enough. You have James Bond being compromised while on duty, and MI6 not knowing whether he can actually be trusted, like Die Another Day. And even the whole concept of, is James Bond still relevant in the, post 9/11 age, if that's what you want to call it? Okay, that's fine, but they dealt with that in like 3 sentences in GoldenEye. And here, that's the whole movie. So I felt, I kind of didn't understand how the people writing this didn't say, yeah, we've kind of done this before. A lot of this before. Also, without going into details, the villain's plot is actually kind of lame. It's very petty and small. And Sam Mendes is clearly, arguably, wants to make Javier Bardem's character into sort of the equivalent of the Joker of the James Bond series. And there are large...
The Batman series.
The Joker of the... Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Sorry.
Yes, the equivalent thereof. And there are large portions of the second act, very good portions, arguably the most sustained, the best sustained chunk of the film, that feel, cribbed from The Dark Knight, frankly. There's no other way to say that. But it doesn't work as well because when you go back and look at his plot, there's no real reason for him to engage in Joker-like plotting, except for the fact they want it to be like The Dark Knight. I'm reminded of, Roger Ebert's vicious pan of the Jackal that basically said, the Jackal is the kind of assassin that in order to kill a fly, he would book like a first-class ticket to Paris, buy locally grown organic bug feeder, come back and disguise himself as a bee and kill the bug.
He's very accurate in that review, though.
Yeah.
The Jackal is a terrible movie.
Yeah, exactly. And And I felt the third act of the film kind of dragged, frankly. I don't want to go into what it is. It's very different from a conventional Bond film, and I thought that was pretty cool. Although it did bring to mind several other films that we may or may not talk about. But that act felt very redundant. You basically you set up an action scene, the action scene occurs, and then you go, oh wait, it's not over. The exact same action scene's about to occur again. But again, this is nitpicking. If you're just going for a rollicking, good time James Bond picture, you're going to get your money's worth. It's big, it's spectacular, it's the dialogue is very good. It's very well acted by, Bardem, Daniel Craig, Judi Dench, Ralph Fiennes. I forget the name of the woman that plays, I guess, the damsel in distress, for lack of a better word.
Berenice Marlowe.
Yes, she is excellent in a somewhat truncated role. But it frustrates me because I think had they been more willing to tell their story in a more, to not so much repeat themselves, it would have been among the great James Bond films rather than just a very good James Bond film. And the potential for greatness is there. And because it falls short, I'm perhaps harder on it than it should be. Okay. And that's for now.
All right. Brandon, what did you think of Skyfall?
I too really enjoyed it. But unlike Scott, I wasn't mad that they were borrowing from other films. I felt the whole film and it was surprising it worked. It flowed as well as it did, but I felt it was woven of every James Bond film of the previous 22. There was something there in the plot or a little device from it. Like Scott mentioned, the GoldenEye world is not enough stuff, but I saw some Man with the Golden Gun as well, with Bardem being
one of your favorites.
With Bardem being the anti-Bond, the dark guy, and he had a island base far off, and a woman that was his own who was frightened to death of him and wanted James Bond to get her out of it. But I liked that it kind of embraced that. It didn't feel like Die Another Day when they did the 40th anniversary. Just kept doing all these awkward, take you out of the moment winks to the previous history of Bond. This one kind of naturally told the story. My one thing when I left the film, I wondered immediately. I'm unsure if this is going to age well. This one. Because there's just some things that happen that I think upon more viewings or looking down the road might come off as hokey or a little weird. But I don't know if it'll play like that, but that thought kept crossing my mind. I don't want to get into spoiler territory.
Okay, yeah. Would you say in the same way that other Bond films may or may not have aged because of certain things that they do? Such as a slide whistle and the Man with the Golden Gun?
Yeah. So, some things like people back in the day loved Moonraker. Now, look at how they feel about it. Because that movie was a massive hit back in 79. But, not going into spoilers, but there's some things towards the end of the film that I don't know how people will look at them 10 years down the road.
Okay.
Abe. Cool. I think that I'm the outsider here in terms of the Bond films. So, as a Bond film, it was actually really good. I liked it. In terms of being a general film, it was really good too. So that's a good thing. I did have problems with it as well. I think that, Scott, you kind of touched upon it. Toward the third act, it kind of, I don't know why, but it just kind of didn't really reveal anything that was, I guess, Bond-like, because it seemed like they were kind of playing King of the Hill versus solving any kind of international crime or some kind of spy game. But on the whole, it was pretty cool. I think it was simplified in terms of Bond having to deal with not having all these cool gadgets. There was a lot of tastes of Lethal Weapon 4 and other kind of movies where new age versus old age kind of thing.
Computers are bad.
Yeah, and sometimes you need a knife to take care of everything and, that kind of stuff. But on the whole, it was a pretty good film. For me, it did drag a little bit toward the end there. Just in terms of time, I was kind of realizing that I was still sitting in my seat, but that's not a huge knock.
All right. I really enjoyed this movie. I would not necessarily say, "Oh man, it's one of the best Bond films of all time," and use that voice ever. But I do think it's a very entertaining film. And what I really liked about it was, and I mean, we all talked about Quantum of Solace in our commentary for it, and I know Scott and Brandon are bigger fans of the movie than I am, but my problem with that movie was it didn't feel like a Bond movie to me necessarily, and this movie felt like a Bond movie, and I got that from Sam Mendes, who seemed to be like directing the hell out of this movie, much like Martin Campbell did with Casino Royale. It feels like he wanted to make a really fun Bond film, and yes, it does have dark elements, and there are little things that make you go, "Oh, that sucks for him," but on the whole, it feels like a fun, engaging Bond film. It has various elements that kind of ride the line between being what Daniel Craig's brought to this, or what the Daniel Craig era has been bringing, which is kind of a more grounded sense to an extent, mixed with various flights of fancy with Bond and like little whimsical elements, like things of. There's one fight scene in particular where a certain element is introduced that you'd only see in a Bond movie, and that feels wholly appropriate because of it. And just in general, yeah, the movie looks fantastic. It's a great look. It deserves the cinematography. It deserves recognition for its cinematography. Roger Deakins knocks it out of the park. A whole sequence in Shanghai it's my favorite whole sequence of the movie. It's just fantastic to look at. And the acting across the board I think is all quite good. Daniel Craig continues to kind of bring out a third dimension to the Bond character, which you only occasionally see in some of the other Bond films. Then this whole Craig era has been doing a good enough job of having him be a person in it. Judi Dench, I think, is quite good. Javier Bardem's having a blast as the villain in this movie. Like, it's as if like he's like, well, I can't just be Anton Chigurh again, so I'm going to be something completely different, and he did, and I liked it. And Ray Fiennes playing like the nicest Voldemort I've ever seen in this movie. Not just a bad guy. And yeah, I mean, you have your Bond women. I mean, Naomi Harris and Berenice Mello, like they're quite good. Like, yeah, I like the actors. I like the action in this movie is a lot of fun. I wouldn't say it's as grandiose in scope as Casino Royale, which has a crazy parkour chase and the airport runway scene and all that stuff. But like, it's still a lot of good and kind of different action. It's a lot of very diverse. And just the whole, and also Thomas Newman's score. I really enjoyed the score for this movie. I was surprised how much I was enjoying Thomas Newman's score for a James Bond movie. I was like, yeah, this is like good job, Sam Mendes, for bringing your boy on board and making it work.
About the simplicity of it all. I mean, the Bond women. I haven't seen too many, but the Bond women in this one, he has one hot night with this girl, and that's kind of it. It doesn't really linger. I mean, I guess I'm comparing it to From Russia with Love, where she's there like the entire movie, and she kind of just is a person who's so attracted to James Bond that she has no, I guess, real relevancy. And then the other stuff is the action sequence. I like the shooting of the action sequences because I could see everything. It wasn't like Bourne Identity style where it's super shaky cam and really close in the face. I mean, these action sequences, there is a lot of choreography, but at the same time, I appreciate that I can sit back and view it all in the same frame without them having to make me feel as though I should see these things from a first-person point of view. And lastly about that, it's just like the car chase sequences, much better than Quantum of Solace, because they're very clean. Even when they're crashing or whatever, it's still a clean-looking shot, and I can still feel as though I'm watching a pretty good movie.
The geography of the scene works well. Like, I understand where I am and what's around me.
Scott? I absolutely agree. I would just like to point out that the Bourne Identity had actually very clean action cutting. It was the Bourne Supremacy and the Ultimatum. Sorry. But that's one of the reasons I like the Bourne Identity as much as I do. But no, the action sequences are terrific. They're very clean. They're very, he pulls the camera back. And what was my thought? I do like the relationship with both of the main Bond girls, if you will. I like that it's very, Naomi Harris and his relationship are very casual. She's, and I don't want to get too much into this just because I think there's a misperception that, every time a new Bond film comes out, everybody says, oh my goodness, this is the most mature Bond woman ever. They've been saying that since The Living Daylights. And it's been, Bond girls have been Bond women since The Living Daylights, let's be honest, with a few exceptions here and there. But I did like the certain, that there was really no emotional attachment on either of their parts. And that was nice. I did like that Ray Fiennes was playing arguably the nicest character he's ever played, with the possible exception of Maid Manhattan, which I've never seen.
Constant Gardner, he's holding a candle out for his wife.
But he's still tortured. He's still dark and tortured. It's funny because when his casting was announced, he was actually announced that he was playing a dark and complex character, which of course at the time made me laugh because it's Ray Fiennes, complex character, because he's played so many happy whatevers, but apparently it was misdirection. Because he's actually very warm and happy in this film.
That skipping scene in Schindler's List. Oh my god!
Exactly. He has such a lovely musical number.
Yeah.
And there were things that bothered me. Again, I don't want to get into details unless I'm given permission to ahead of time. But when you finally figure out the main villain's ultimate goal, it's really small scale.
True.
And frankly, something that I don't think requires Bond to save the day. I think if everybody had just had their ducks in a row, that the villain would have been stopped very easily.
I think for what this movie, so what I found interesting about Skyfall is that while it's not a reboot of the Bond series, which would be odd given that Daniel Craig's still starring as Bond, it feels like this is another entry in this is how we're bringing James Bond back to where Bond status quo should be.
Yes.
In that it establishes certain things about the Bond mythos that were otherwise already in place for the past 50 years. And so, Casino Royale established this is how James Bond became 007. And then Quantum of Solace happened for whatever reason to establish this is how he became, how he learned his lesson about attachments to an extent and moving, whatever you want to go from that. And then Skyfall brings in elements of what else is going to be going on in the world that Bond exists in, such as something like Q. And so I guess because of that, you're stripping away the idea of having a crazy megalomaniac villain for the sake of having a more personal aspect handed into this series. So in Bond 4, then we're gonna get the villain that has a giant space station with a super rope that connects to Atlantis that he slides back and forth on and tries to take over the world with or something. Just something crazy out of left field.
Scorpio.
And now that we've had, exactly, and now that we've had, I don't know how necessary it may be, but now that we've had 3 films to establish this, Bond will just be, hey, it's James Bond. It's called to duty to take on some giant world adventure kind of thing. I guess that's.
We talked about this a lot in the Quantum of Solace commentary, that you were disappointed in, that reminded you of the Matrix sequels, where in the Matrix, he hangs up the phone, and it seems like, okay, the movie's over, he's going to save Zion and, going to destroy the Matrix. And then the Matrix Reloaded is like, oh, well, he's back to sort of being, the underdog again, for lack of a better word. And yes, that's true with Quantum of Solace. And I would say the same thing with this film, which is that, at the end of Casino Royale, ooh, now he's James Bond, yay. The end of Quantum of Solace, ooh, now he's James Bond, yay. But then in the beginning of this film, we're like, oh, wait, he's still not James Bond yet. And it bothered me less in Quantum of Solace because there was at least still sort of a reason for him to not be whole yet, because he's still mourning the death of Vesper, whose last name escapes me.
Vesper Lynd.
Thank you, Vesper Lynd. But, he's dealt with that in the end of Quantum of Solace. And in this film, which theoretically he's been aged up quite a bit, and it almost feels like he went from the beginning of his career to the almost arguably the end of his career, and he's still learning how to be James Bond.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like you said with this one, but this one kind of tricks you into that because you kind of feel like you're already immersed in this world already, and then only to find out that nope, here we go, now we're starting.
So because it throws you into a whole sequence of you gotta get this or else this happens. Then because something doesn't happen, everything crazy it seems like that could possibly happen because of this happens. But then you dwindle it down, and it's like there's one common denominator, and that is actually something that's much more personal than you expected.
Nothing in this movie made me feel like he was any point starting out. I felt like I was with the seasoned vet until the end told me otherwise.
Yeah, and without going into details about the end, again, since we're seeing what theoretically and isn't, so this is not a spoiler, anyone that hasn't seen the film, the last James Bond story. You know, it's like, wait a minute, he's sort of, we're being reintroduced into the world of James Bond, but this is, you know, he's almost near retirement age at this point, basically. So again, it's sort of like we missed the middle of the story. Or, again, there's sort of, as you said, Aaron, we've had basically 3 reboots in a row. And I, you know, watching the film, and this isn't so much a criticism of the film as it is, do you think that having a, you know, Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker type film with Daniel Craig is going to work?
Now, you pointed this out in your review, and I found that to be interesting, because I agree with you. I would say that having Daniel Craig in the role of that guy who's going on an out-of-this-world adventure to an extent, or, like, yeah, I think it's necessary to have these kind of movies as opposed to the Roger Moore type movies where you have him going on those kind of adventures, because Daniel Craig and how his Bond is being written and how he's playing him, he seems more suited to a more close quarter kind of action setting as opposed to a broad and gigantic in scope action setting. So I guess like, yes, the villain's plot in this movie is very straightforward in terms of what he's trying to do, but so yes, I think Daniel Craig he's more suited to something like this kind of thing than something grander. So I'll be curious to see what, you know, the Spy Who Met Me Last Supper potential title thought. I'll be curious if that one is going to be grander in scale now, or now that we've had these 3 introductions to the Bond character in a row, or if it's going to be another, hey, remember this is how Bond got his fancy cigarette lighter episode. Like,
and, you know, I watching the film, which arguably does have more, you know, only by comparison perhaps, more of a Roger Moore quality than the last 2 films. I don't know how, you know, comfortable is too strong of a word, but I don't know how comfortable I was seeing how much I bought Daniel Craig doing these larger-than-life Roger Moore type stunts, like when there's a scene where he's sort of riding an elevator. It's such a, you know, it's a normal stunt. Any action star could do it, but it's done in such this grand, over the top way. And there's like, you know, I don't know if I buy this Bond doing that.
Well, I don't think they went too far with Craig. I mean, there's a certain level where you could go and you just wouldn't buy it, but I think they kind of kept it tame enough. What I didn't buy was during the opening sequence with the motorcycles, where you could clearly tell it was a digitally drawn-on face.
Right, when they're on the roofs.
When they're riding through Istanbul, not Constantinople.
Yes, I mean, it was a little bit distracting when I was watching.
I agree with you there because of how practical everything else seemed. And then you're like, oh, and here's Bond
and a green screen.
Well, the face wasn't matching. It was kind of, you'd think they could do better, but it was kind of moving differently than the body.
That reminded me a lot of what's that movie with Ryan Gosling? Drive. Just like when they have like the mask.
You forgot Drive?
I mentioned it like earlier too, but it's just when they have the mask and he's doing the stunt work. Yeah, it looked like that when they were on there.
Well, and it's funny because Roger Moore, his era of Bond, a lot of it is known for, you know, obvious stuntmen in place of him because of his age and not being able to do stunts. Mm-hmm. And this was just kind of like the modern version of that.
It's funny you say that because that's the whole scene that actually there's one scene involving the damn Komodo dragons where it's like that's not really there. But I mean, watching the opening sequence, which I think is pretty great, I really enjoyed that.
Oh yeah. It is a great sequence.
And it'll get me to another point in a second. But I think it seemed noticeable that things that were like something. I mean, we all know a train gets destroyed from the trailers, so like it seemed like that and like the motorcycle stuff. I feel like I could see that it was an effect more than other scenes in the movie. That seemed apparent to me. I wouldn't say it knocked it down for me at all because I'm like, well, obviously they didn't like do that really, but. I know where you're coming from, I guess.
It was a nitpick, but I mean, it didn't, you know, I still love the sequence. It just, you know, it was something noticeable.
I'll get it back to what Scott was bringing up, and like, would I want to see like Daniel Craig in giant adventure movies or more of like these kind of rough and tumble Bonds that Daniel Craig's been doing, like, and how Skyfall kind of is teasing the idea of having it both ways. I mean, I was fine with the elevator scene, which I thought was pretty cool, and like,
oh yeah,
and like even the Komodo dragon thing. I feel like this is where how I started. It just feels like a Bond film to me. Like it has flavors of other Bonds going on, and I like the idea that they're trying that out. I like that Sam Mendes clearly seems like a fan of Bond films, where he's like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have fun doing it. Like why else would you have Daniel Craig, jump on something to get out of something that would like otherwise seem like, oh, that's goofy, but like in the Bond movie, it works because it feels like he's doing it Bond style. He jumps on he doesn't just like walk down a ladder and hop onto a train. He takes the motorcycle and crashes into the wall so he can fling himself onto a train. Like it's done Bond style to me, and I like that. I was on board with those things.
I think if anything, Skyfall could serve as a bridge film to allowing his last two to be a bit more over the top and it not seem out of place or just a drastic change.
Sure. I will now. Okay, the third act. Didn't present as many issues to me. I don't know. I was just wrapped up in it. But one thing that was kind of getting to me was the callbacks to Bond films, and there's a very specific one I don't want to reveal necessarily, but it feels at times like it was somewhat pandering to fans. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially given something that's very within the Bond series that people seem to all know that is revealed, and then you like, well, in my eyes, I'm like, how does the logic work on how he has this thing? And then it has like it has its. I mean, this is so vague. I have to keep saying thing and that, but okay. So getting back to my main point, I feel like some of the references were at times feel like pandering, like having Q say something like, "What do you think we were going to give you? An exploding pen?" Like
Yes.
It feels like they're going out of their way to kind of be like, hey guys, this is a Bond movie. And as much as I like the fact that it feels more like a Bond movie, I was not as big a fan of the fact that they're calling out the fact that they know it's a Bond movie.
Yeah. And my
pointing
problem...
out.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, pointing out more GoldenEye stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And, my problem with the thing that Aaron's referring to, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, there is... it's a very winking, light, comical moment that, it's actually also the first time we hear the Bond theme song, I think, which is my clue is whether I'm talking about the same thing you're talking about.
Yep.
And then it follows a scene of rather horrifying violence. And then all of a sudden, it's okay, because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Da-da, da-da, da-da. Like, something really awful just happened.
Yeah.
And, you shouldn't be winking at the audience right now if you want us to take this film serious.
So one last thing I want to kind of bring up before we get to our rating of the film. Bond in Shanghai kind of lets people die before they need to. Did you notice this?
Yeah.
Well,
he kind of lets too many. I feel like he kind of like
he lets
casually
three innocent people die.
Yeah, like there's a point where he can stop someone from like taking out a couple security guards, then the intended target of him. But Bond just kind of like sits back and lets it happen before he pursues his target, and that bugged me.
One security guard. Okay.
Two security guards.
Maybe he wasn't fast enough for the second security guard, but that poor man in the chair who we don't know who he is at all.
He was the modern day Bill Gates. He was going to give billions of dollars to children's charities.
Yeah, it's clearly.
Bond let him get shot. No, I agree with you. I even mentioned that in my review, that he was sort of, again, it sort of gives back to the whole, in action film, security guards aren't really human.
Yeah.
It's okay to kill them because they don't count. And again, if you were showing that, Bond was just off his game, then that would be fine. But that's not the way the scene plays out. The scene plays out, he sits on his butt and waits because, he wants to wait till the perfect time. Well,
yeah, I was shocked when I got shot.
Does Bond usually... Yeah, again, I'm an outside perspective. Does Bond usually, save as many people as he can?
Well,
he tries.
Yeah, he does, and he's usually not put in a position where he's just like, hey, what's that over there? Oh, he's shot. Like, he doesn't, that doesn't happen generally, no.
Yeah.
Although, I will say, leading up to that scene, I was thinking of Brandon because there was a shot of James Bond in disguise before he quickly got rid of that disguise.
He's in a driver's cap? Yeah.
Yeah, he had a limousine outfit on, so I was like, oh, he's going to be in disguise.
It's right there.
I thought he was going to be the limo driver for a second for that guy who looked like a European Matthew Fox. That's what he seemed like to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
But who's actually, his name is Olo Rapace, and he is the husband to Naomi Rapace, who started the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which was remade with Daniel Craig.
Oh my God.
That's
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, that's right. I just Cloud Atlas that one. Okay. So, all right. Any final thoughts on Skyfall before we give our rating? Ben Whishaw. Oh, Ben Whishaw is cute. Did we like Ben Whishaw as cute?
Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
I did.
Yeah.
It's-
It's fun too. Good thoughts on that one. All right, so let's get to our rating for Skyfall. We have a rating each week for Out Now, Fair and Abe on based on when you should go and see the movie, and the scale for that is IMAX, a theater, Dollar Theater, Netflix, HBO TV. You're just kind of forget about it. Scott Mendelson, where would you put Skyfall on that scale?
IMAX.
IMAX. Brandon.
IMAX.
It's a
Abe?
theater.
I would say IMAX as well, especially because it's only going to be in IMAX for like a couple weeks, I think. What takes it out? Does Twilight take it out next week?
There might be a limited Twilight release. I'm not sure.
Okay, I know Rise of the Guardians is IMAX.
Yeah.
Sure, so. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, the movie isn't shot for IMAX, but the way it's done, there's so much movie that was shot on it, like, they basically take away the black bars from the widescreen, and that's how it's projected. That's the best way to describe it, and it looks glorious. So, okay, let's get to movie
Call
callback.
back.
This is where we discuss a couple films that may kind of relate to the main film of the week, just kind of big reference to ones we saw. I'll just start because I had some in mind. Mission Impossible came to mind very quickly to me, because basically they get the knock list. That's what happens in the movie.
Yep.
The very list that Tom Cruise is trying to, deal with in that movie, it seems like Bond is dealing with on the MI6 side of things in this one. And yeah, we made mention of other Bond films, and Straw Dogs came to mind for very specific reasons. Abe?
Dark Knight Trilogy, and also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1990s film. Why?
The first one?
Because Daniel Craig gets his ass kicked. He has to go back to, like, this old remote farm. And boom! Take down the shredder.
There you go. Scott?
Well, see, that would have been true as at the end of the film. Well, never mind. I don't want to say spoilers. But
Okay.
yes, it's close. Yes. Yes, Straw Dogs. Although during that scene in question, the callback I kept thinking of was a major confrontation between Matt Damon and Clive Owen in The Bourne Identity.
Nice.
But yeah, Straw Dogs. If you want to be, cynical about it, you could say Home Alone. Obviously Mission Impossible with the knock list. They gotta stop putting all those people's names on one list.
Yeah, that really isn't the best way
That
to
Excel sheet is not secure.
Yeah.
And obviously the Bond films, and I felt that it was mainly World's Not Enough, GoldenEye with a dash of Die Another Day. And yes, the Dark Knight specifically, the Javier Bardem, is arguably a Joker type villain, both in his mannerisms and the way, the sort of, plan for any contingency type plotting, and in his constant lecturing also.
Except his scars are on the
Yeah.
inside.
Exactly.
You know,
Brandon?
that's true.
Brandon?
As mentioned before, Home Alone, but also Last House on the Left, Nightmare on Elm Street. And the last third, the scenery and everything reminded me of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1.
Oh. That movie looks so good, Skyfall, by the way. Like, there's that shot, where, the only natural light is the burning building.
I like that.
And it's just really cool. But yeah, okay, let's move on.